Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be talking about a single mother facing a court-martial for refusing to deploy to Afghanistan. We'll also be discussing hand puppets that have become victims of the H1N1 flu, the Downsizer Dispatch, and a whole lot more coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. It is episode 134, and as always, it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
All right, Nick, we have a big show tonight. We have a lot to talk about. We are going to be talking about those poor hand puppets who, yes, have fell victim to the H1N1 virus, but more on that later. First, I wanted to go over to the UK and talk about, well, their ban on guns that has left one ex-soldier in a lot of hot water. In this story, at first I thought it was one of those fake news articles that you start to read about to kind of pick on certain aspects of our society, such as banning guns. And this one poor man by the name of Paul Clark, who's 27, an ex-soldier in the UK, may be facing up to 5 years in jail because someone threw a gun into his backyard. Now, that wasn't the crime he faced. The crime he faced is he did the right thing and he picked up the gun and decided to take it to the police station to see if it was involved in some sort of a crime. What he should have done, I guess, is just kept it in his house, because immediately after taking the gun into the police station, he was not thanked or congratulated for getting this gun that was probably involved in some kind of a crime off the streets. What he was faced with was handcuffs and a jail cell. He then went to trial, where he was found guilty. The jury only deliberated for 20 minutes before finding him guilty. He's now awaiting sentencing and facing up to at least 5 years in jail. Nick, how can this happen? How do you get to the point in a society where, in a Western society here we're talking about, we're supposed to be all civilized, where we're talking about putting someone behind bars for over 5 years because someone else threw a gun in their yard and he took it to the police station?
Well, it's Great Britain. What do you want me to say? No offense to our viewers in
But this could have happened here. I mean, there's parts in the United States that have gun bans that are just as strict or almost as strict as in the UK. Yeah,
it could have happened here. I mean, it could have happened in the District of Columbia. There aren't too many places that are come all that close to the UK, except for maybe
It was
DC.
a sawed-off shotgun, so this is something that's...
Well, yeah, but it's still a gun. He picked it up because he believed it was involved in a crime, which, granted, actually probably wasn't, if you're actually thinking about it, probably wasn't the best thing to do, because it's evidence, most likely. Probably should have called the police and let them handle it instead of tainting the evidence. But he was trying to do the right thing. It's just that they have asinine gun laws in the United Kingdom and in many places around the world, and these are some of the unintended consequences. But it's not that surprising when you consider the fact that Great Britain is a place where people get carded for buying a pizza wheel to make sure they're over 18. I mean, you can't cut pizza unless you're over 18. You can't buy silverware, knives and forks and spoons.
But clearly it's not working. Clearly there are still illegal guns on the street, as this is an example. Someone was using this gun. It also notes in this article here that his fence is the shortest fence on the entire street, so it makes sense that it was thrown over the short fence when someone's running by, I don't know, being pursued by the police or something. So there's still clearly guns on the street, so all their cracking down hasn't fixed the problem. There's still plenty of violent crime. You just have a lot more stabbings than shootings, I guess. Don't worry, they're taking care of that with the pizza cutters and the fork bans, Nick, as you mentioned. But what baffles me, Nick, what baffles me more than anything is this man, he's not being tried because he was tampering with evidence. That's not the rationale behind this. The rationale is that he was possessing a firearm. The fact that he was possessing one, even if he was just taking it to the police station, and the fact that a jury of his peers only took 20 minutes to convict him on this, because it doesn't matter what the spirit of the law is or anything. I mean, the fact that he's possessing it. The judge says that, in this case, said, quote, "This is an unusual case, but in the law, there is no dispute that Mr. Clark has no defense in this charge. The intention of anybody possessing a firearm is irrelevant." So you can have the best intentions, but you're doing it, so it's illegal.
Well, and there's a lot of problems that the UK has. I mean, following the handgun ban, violent crime rates went up. Gun crime rates went up. Great Britain is now arming a contingent of its police force, not necessarily all of the police force, although I believe they're moving in that direction, because they've banned guns and violent crime rates have gone up. You don't really have very much of a right to self-defense in the United Kingdom. So if somebody does break into your house, even if you're going to try to defend your house with a baseball bat, there's a very good chance you're going to go to jail instead of the criminal. And the fact that this individual is facing 5 years for possession of a gun is particularly telling, because in the United Kingdom, they don't have a very good reputation for being tough on violent criminals. To be honest, he probably could have stabbed somebody or perhaps even raped somebody and received a similar sentence or a lesser sentence in the United Kingdom. So they have a justice system that's obsessed with, trying to prevent violent crime by disarming the entire population.
And the population is clearly feeding right into this, Nick,
or taking
a jury of his peers was like, yep, we agree. And let's see. I mean, he's going to be sentenced December 5th. Hopefully he'll get the minimum sentence of 5 years. Is that what we're hoping for in this case? The hope is that he's only getting 5 years behind bars.
And, to our viewers in the United Kingdom, I mean, if you're somebody who doesn't want to live in a police state, I would advise you to get out. Move. I mean, if you don't necessarily come to the United States, hey, there are problems wherever you go. But personally, I'd much rather be living in Canada, New Zealand, Australia, the U.S., so there are plenty of places you can go. Heck, I mean, Ireland is even a little bit more free than the United Kingdom. They're a lot more economically free, actually. They're pretty close to the United States in that regard. So get out of the United Kingdom, because honestly, I don't think there's any hope for the UK at this point. It's such a nanny state. I would call it a police state. And it doesn't seem like the general population there, of course, there are millions of people living in the UK. They all have their own opinions and beliefs, but it doesn't seem like the general attitude of the population there is one where they actually believe that they have individual rights and liberties, and one that would stand up for them. So it seems like there's no hope there.
Well, Nick, it may be true. People tend to get the government they deserve, the ones they want. The people in the UK seem to want the government to tell them how to brush their teeth, how to pick their nose, how to wipe their butt. That's what they're going to get.
It's not so much that we don't have that here in the United States. It's just that, as a general rule, things aren't quite so bad. And it doesn't seem like we're on such a fast track to a really totalitarian society, whereas I think you can make a case that the United Kingdom is.
I'll make a case that the United States is on that way right now,
well,
Nick.
We're on that track, but we're better off.
Shifting gears, another freedom is starting to go by the wayside as the FDA is trying to crack down even more on these alcohol caffeine combo drinks that are sold by millions and millions of retailers and bunch of manufacturers around the United States. Previously, the FDA had put pressures on Miller and Anheuser-Busch to get rid of these drinks such as Bud Extra, Till, and Sparks. And he pulled those from the market earlier this year. We reported on that. They were claiming that they were trying to get teens to start drinking underage because it's one of these caffeine drinks, and the teens would get mixed up and think it's cool and buy the alcoholic version. We didn't really buy into that, but they convinced Miller and Coors to pull these things off the shelf.
It should be noted that they do put these things in the beer cooler. Like if you walk into a gas station, they are alcoholic beverages, and the stores know that. So they do cards.
But since they have the drug caffeine in them, somehow teens are going to want to drink more. Anyways, the FDA is not even mentioning this argument in the latest round. Now that they've gotten the bigger distributors to pull them off the shelf, they're going after the little guys. The FDA recently sent letters to nearly 30 manufacturers asking them to explain their rationale for concluding that such beverages are safe and legal. Why is this beverage safe and legal? Well, because it's America, God damn it. And this is a free country, and I'm mixing beer with caffeine, and it's America, God damn it. Well, and that's why it's legal.
Well, yeah, I mean, and if it doesn't make any sense.
Am I wrong here, Nick?
No, I mean, if you look at
that's my rationale.
Yeah, I mean, people are going to be drinking this stuff anyway. I mean, if you look at some of the more popular mixed drinks out there, Red Bull and vodka is a popular mix. That's caffeine and alcohol, and they don't come mixed together all at once, but you can buy the Red Bull and you can buy the vodka and you can put them together. If you're over the age of 21, one would assume that you're old enough to make that decision. I mean, alcohol is not good for you in the first place. Caffeine isn't. But under the, if these new rules and regulations are adopted, it'll be perfectly legal for you to drink a cup of coffee while you drink Jack Daniels. but you won't be able to go into a store and buy beer that has caffeine in it. How does that make sense?
Well, Nick, don't worry. They're aware of this. They're aware of this fact, and that's next on the chopping block. They're going to figure that out after they figure out if this is legal.
Oh, they're going to make it illegal to drink caffeine and alcohol at the same time?
Well, they're aware. They haven't made any decision around it, but that would be the next thing that they're going to look at after they figure out what's going on with these 30 smaller manufacturers. They need to explain their rationale. It just seems so. Where's the law? Where does the FDA get to just create laws? I thought we were supposed to be some kind of representative. I thought we were supposed to have representatives that pass laws and then signed by the president, but apparently the FDA now can make laws and make certain products illegal. We used to have it and change the Constitution to have prohibition.
It's not just the FDA either. I mean, number one, you're right. It's a federal thing. I don't see how the federal government has the authority to dictate this policy to the states. And even if it did, it should require an act of Congress, but it's not just the FDA. I mean, it's the FDA and the ATF.
You're banning a substance. You're prohibiting something.
Right.
During Prohibition, you had to change the Constitution, Nick. Yes. You had to add an amendment to the Constitution, get 2/3 majority of the states to pass it into law and change the Constitution. And then if you want to repeal it, you have to have 2/3
That's not the country we live in anymore.
Nick, we don't even have an act of Congress anymore. Now it's just the FDA, some nameless bureaucrat who's got a job, is now passing laws.
Actually, it's probably more like a committee of nameless bureaucrats.
Okay, a committee of nameless bureaucats that I don't know their names.
So no bureaucrat actually has to take accountability. They just get on a committee and then they kind of, work it out.
I never, ever had an opportunity to vote for these people. Not to say that it would matter. I don't think that I'm represented in Washington anyways, but they're not even pretending anymore, Nick. Now they're just banning substances, 2 legal substances. Now if you put them together, they're illegal. They say that because sexual assaults go up if you drink these beverages.
If you drink a lot of alcohol, aren't sexual assaults likely to go up? I mean, I don't know. To me, that just seems insane. Like the Red Bulls and vodkas that causes rapes to happen, but drinking whiskey doesn't. And does this apply to whiskey and Coke? Because that's one of the most popular mixed drinks in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people drink some kind of liquor and Coke, rum and Coke, whiskey and Coke.
Well, you know what it is? It's that we have these bureaucracies that pay people to find problems and then do this. The problem is that America's going down this path that we're no longer representative. We no longer have people who we elect that represent us. Instead, they've delegated it to other people, and I know we're going to be getting into the Downsizer Dispatch soon, and they have a lot of remedies to fix this problem. But, Nick, you talk about, well, it's getting bad in the UK. Well, I know this doesn't seem like a big deal to many people, but I think it's very telling on what's happening to the freedoms in this country.
Yeah, and
it's only going to affect a very small amount of people who used to enjoy this beverage. Now they can't do it anymore. It's going to affect a few manufacturers. A bunch of people will lose their jobs. Of course, they'll go on unemployment at first, and we'll have to.
Everybody else who still has a job in this country will have to.
And then we'll wonder why the economy sucks because we're cracking down on freedoms, over-regulating ourselves, and that's the direction we're going.
Well, and it's not just so much that we don't have representational government anymore, it's also that we don't have limited government. And like you were pointing out, Toby, when we had federal alcohol prohibition, they actually had to pass a constitutional amendment, which was a much more rigorous process. And the intent when this country was founded was not to make everything subject to the whims of the legislature or of Congress.
Or some committee.
Government is supposed to have limits, and it's supposed to exist to protect your life, liberty, and property. And if you remove those limits, and you say that, well, we don't have a constitution that actually imposes any kind of hard definition of what government may and may not do, then essentially you have totalitarian government. If it's not limited, then it's totalitarian in that they can get involved in any aspect of your life. And they probably will, given enough time, and that seems to be what they're doing over time, is regulating every aspect of Americans' day-to-day lives. And I think it gets back to the fact that nobody holds the government accountable and keeps it limited in the way that it was intended to be, and the way that, from a lawful standpoint, it should be.
All right, Nick, we're going a little bit over time. We do get into the aspect now. I mean, this drives me crazy. I mean, but get them while they can. You see these drinks in the store, buy them now because it's not long before they like Sparks and Tilt are taken off the market as well. I'm sure there's going to be some kind of a smaller black market for that probably.
Probably have to smuggle them in from Canada. You have to smuggle in clove cigarettes from Canada and Cuban cigars.
Clove cigarettes now?
Flavored cigarettes, yeah.
Cloves are now illegal?
I believe so.
That went with the vanillas as well?
I believe so. So if you want to get your hands on some cloves, I guess you have to go to Canada.
Goodness gracious.
The land of the free up there, I guess.
Well, we got to do another topic on that sometime. I don't want them, but I just think it's, oh, God, goodness. There's a lot of people who smoke cloves. Anyways, we got to move on. We're running low on time. We got to get into the Downsizer Dispatch and let people know how they can try to steer this behemoth of a government, this giant ship that's cruising in one direction. How is one person supposed to make a difference, Nick? Well, it's by banding together, of course, and going to downsizedc.org and talking about what?
Well, this week I'm not actually talking about a particular campaign over at downsizedc.org. What I will say is that Jim Babka spoke at the Williamsport, Pennsylvania Tea Party. And he was reflecting in this email about some of the successes they had there. Now, these tea parties have been going on across the country, and granted, a lot of the people there, they aren't probably completely committed to liberty. There's a lot of partisan Republican things going on there. But nonetheless, a lot of the people turning out, they're actually concerned about the fact that we're going to see higher rates of taxation, higher rates of regulation, and less freedom in this country. And they're probably a good group of people to reach out to and try to get on board to do something meaningful, because they can hold signs all they want, but that doesn't really do an awful lot to actually change the way things are going in Washington. And what they did at this particular Tea Party in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, when Jim Babka spoke, downsizedc.org got a lot of support. They got people to sign on to their petitions for things like the Read the Bills Act, the One Subject at a Time, and Write the Laws Acts. So, and these are concrete proposals that would actually slow the growth of government down. If Congress actually had to read, members of Congress actually had to read the bills that they were going to vote into law, or they had to hear those bills read to them, they couldn't pass 1,100-page healthcare bills, or 900 or whatever it was, 900, 1,600-page Patriot Acts. Whatever they are, these monstrous pieces of legislation are being passed, and virtually no congressman, in many cases, probably no one member of Congress, has actually read the entire bill from front to back. And yet they're voting in the affirmative to make these proposals law when they don't even know what they say. And I think that's a problem. It's something that needs to be addressed if we don't want this country to turn into something like Great Britain or something worse. So go to downsizedc.org, check out the campaigns they have up there, and if you've already done that, you've already responded to our request that you go there and get involved over at downsizedc.org. Tell your friends about it.
And
tell
do it
your
again.
family about it.
Just because you sent in one email, Nick, doesn't mean that you can't harass them over and over again. That's what I love doing.
Yeah, they make it easy for you. It's an automated form. It takes like a minute.
Hey, I also did want to note that Write the Laws Act, that's what we're talking about with the FDA passing its own laws.
Right.
The FDA right now is passing laws to ban a substance that's supposed to be the Congress's job. That's the job of the legislature.
And the Write the Laws Act would say that Congress actually would have to write all of the laws that Americans actually had to follow. We couldn't let these bureaucracies write laws.
But most of the representatives and a lot of Americans out there, well, they just disagree. But I don't. If you don't disagree, downsizedc.org. All right, we have to go move along, take a quick break because we have a lot more to get into. What happens if you're a single mother or father, I guess, and you're asked to deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan? What do you do with your child? We'll tell you that and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV.
This is Glenn Jacobs, and you're watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
All right, Nick. What happens if you are in the armed forces, you're a single parent, and it's time to deploy? What do you do with your child? Do they have a program set up for that? Personally, what I'd say, if I have a kid, I'm not going to, and especially if I'm single, I'm not going to be joining the Army. I mean, it seems like that's something you would have thought through before. But
a lot of people in the armed forces have kids, and I guess couples break up, parents die, so people are left to single parents. Well, generally you try to find somebody else to watch your kid while you're gone. Grandma, mom, a friend who you trust. But it doesn't always work out that way, and I wanted to touch on this case. U.S. Army Specialist Alexis Hutchington A single mother is being threatened with a military court-martial if she does not agree to deploy to Afghanistan, despite having been told she would be granted extra time to find someone to care for her 11-month-old son while she's overseas. She's from Oakland, California, and is currently being confined at Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, Georgia, after being arrested. Her son was placed in the county foster care system. Hutchinson has been threatened with a court-martial if she does not agree to deploy to Afghanistan on Sunday, November 15th. She has been attempting to find someone to take care of her child, Kamani, while she is deployed overseas, but to no avail. Now, she had given her child to her mother for about a week, but her mother is having health problems and is also caring for some other sick family members, and simply couldn't take care of the child on top of that. So she ended up, giving the child back, and Specialist Hutchinson was told that she'd have more time to actually find somebody to provide care for her child, but her unit, her commander, decided not to do that, and instead has decided to make her face a court-martial.
Seems like a meanie.
Well, the argument being made, the way the story is being reported...
It's a great way to get out of deployment is have a kid.
Right. And the argument being made is that apparently the commanders and the people in the chain of command above Specialist Hutchinson don't believe that she's actually trying to deploy. They believe she's trying to avoid deployment by saying she can't find anyone to take care of her child. But her attorney says she is actually trying to find somebody to take care of her child. And there are probably easier ways to get out of the armed forces than to face a court-martial.
My dad put poison ivy in his boots, and when he showed up for boot camp, his feet were swollen. That was during the Vietnam War.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways.
Dodged the draft.
I mean, there are ways. And it might result in a less than honorable or a dishonorable discharge, which doesn't look good on your record. But apparently that's not what Specialist Hutchinson wants. She doesn't want to be discharged. She just wants to find somebody to take care of her kid who she can trust, but she's facing a court-martial for it. So I don't know. It's not too long after Veterans Day when we're recording this, and it just makes me wonder how much any of the sanctimoniousness really matters. I mean, people will talk, you'll have the newsman give their heartwarming report about how much this country supports its military personnel, but quite frankly...
Do they really?
Well, quite frankly, I mean, when you join the military...
This baby's still nursing, for crying out loud.
I know.
Even if you find someone else for it to go to, it still needs breast milk, and it's best to come from the mother. How are you supposed to... Is she going to be shipping this back? No, of course not. They're going to give it some formula or something. To me, it just screams... many things. It screams, number one, we need to treat veterans much better. I mean, that's a huge topic for a different show. But another thing is, we shouldn't be at these wars anyways, Nick. There's no reason she should be deployed. There's so the whole thing, it just tastes bad to me.
Well, and it's also, you have to remember what the military does. And I'm not saying that women shouldn't serve in the military or that people necessarily shouldn't serve in the military, but people should realize that when they join the military, they're effectively government property.
Yeah, you're no longer an individual with rights.
Yeah, you're not really a human being. I mean, you have, you're entitled to a certain amount of process under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, but you're a resource for the armed forces. And people can say it shouldn't be that way, but that's what the military does.
Yeah,
it kills people and breaks things, and they're not going to treat you like it's summer camp.
But they don't say that. That's another big problem with recruitment, though, Nick. I've talked to these recruiters, and that's not what they talk about. Maybe you'll get a few honest ones, but let's face it, their job is to recruit people into the military, and they're not going to get that by saying you are no longer going to be Toby Island, you are going to be my resource that I am going to use in any way I see fit. They don't say that anymore. I mean, I don't know if they ever did, but they don't say that. So, I mean, there's how much can you blame someone who's told you're going to have a great career, you're going to get training, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, and then, oh, no, you're just a resource.
You're probably not going to get that from your recruiter, but I would say here, for the benefit of anybody watching, if you're thinking about joining the military, that's something you need to keep in mind. When you join up, to a large extent, it doesn't matter what your needs are in your life. You sign up, and even if the contract says certain things, they can always opt out of it. The government can always say, well, we need to do this for the good of the service, for national defense. And once you're in the military, all bets are off. I mean, they can ask you to do just about anything they want to ask you to do. And people need to be aware of that when they're signing up. I know people who've gone in and hated it. I know people who've gone in and they're kind of indifferent about it. I know people who've gone in and they liked it. But I think people need to be informed about the choice before they make it.
All right, Nick. We don't have much time for this, but we did tease it, so we've got to get to it. The puppets, Nick. They've got the H1N1. They've got the swine flu, and they're infected, or at least people are afraid they are. And that's why in one Minnesota library in Minneapolis, in the Hennepin County Library, it's actually, I guess, a lot of libraries, they say that plush toys and hand puppets will no longer be available for checkout or play because of H1N1 flu concerns. Now, to me, I said, you could check out a stuffed animal at the library? That's kind of weird, but whatever. All right. That's not what I want to talk about here. What I want to talk about is this whole clean, germophobic society we live in. Do people know that it's very, very bad for you to grow up in a germ-free environment? The healthiest people grow up in somewhat filthy environments, farm kids. You're looking for the kid who's always sick from school. Chances are he goes home and his mom sprays Lysol over everything, wipes down all the countertops, and makes sure that little Johnny Snowflake never imbibes in any of these harmful bacterias or viruses or anything else that could make him sick. And while it is good to be clean and to a certain extent, people need to remember that the humans have evolved to gain immunities to viruses and bacteria and all sorts of nasty little bugs that are inside of us. And if we do live in a sterile environment, we're all going to die. So, while it is important to wash your hands and wipe down surfaces to a certain extent, let's not forget we evolved to live in the mud.
We did.
To a certain extent.
It's true.
And that's how our bodies are designed. We build up immunities, and we have a stockpile of them. And if you're exposed to them and you get the sniffles, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, people go overboard with the antibacterial soaps, Lysol. It's gotten out of hand. Not only are you creating bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics when you're going overboard with that, but you're also weakening your immune system. And there's some studies out there, although it's not a consensus yet, but there are some studies out there that indicate that allergies, the rise in the level of allergies that we see among people today, have to do with the fact that people's immune systems aren't exposed to the things that immune systems should be exposed to, like bad bacteria and viruses.
Yeah, we've gotten rid of our parasites.
And their body starts attacking things like cat hair or tobacco smoke. It doesn't know what to do because it hasn't lived in a natural environment. I'd
like to turn people to Radiolab. It's an NPR broadcast that talks about one thing about parasites in particular. They say that up to 50% of allergies as well as asthma could be related to the fact that we no longer have certain parasites in us, such as hookworm. Anyways, different show, different topic. Just want to point it out that we are meant to be a little bit filthy. There is some truth.
You don't want to live in squalor.
Right. Oh, be clean, shower, all that stuff. But there is some truth behind the phrase, if it doesn't kill you, it'll only make you stronger. On that note, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Log on to our website, freemindstv.com, for more in the meantime. Until next week. See you later.